ಚೆಕ್ ಚೆಕ್. ಈಗ ವಾಲ್ಯೂಮ್ ನೋಡಿ. ವಾಲ್ಯೂಮ್ ಚೆಕ್ ಮಾಡಿ, ವಾಲ್ಯೂಮ್ ಚೆಕ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಬೇಗ. ವಾಲ್ಯೂಮ್ ಚೆಕ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಸರ್. ಚೆಕ್ ಚೆಕ್ ಅಂದಾಯ್ತು. ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಇದೆಯಾ ಸರಿ ನೋಡಿ.
Yes, yes. Okay.
Check. Hello. Test. 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 Hello. Check.
இந்த பெண்ட் எடுத்துக்கனா சூப்பரா வரும் இல்லையா? குச்சின சைடு
Check. Check. Hello. Test. Test. Hello. Check. 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 Volume கொஞ்சம் கூட. Check. Check. Hello. Hello. Test. 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 Check. Hello. Test. Test.
Check, 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 check,
I request the delegates to please settle down
check,
as we are about to
check,
start
check,
session 1. Our delegates to please settle down.
check, check. Check. நான் பேசிருக்கிறேங்க அது உங்களுக்கு கேட்கணும். Check, 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 check. அண்ணா சவுண்ட் கொஞ்சம் செக் செக் அண்ணா வந்துருக்குது சவுண்ட் வரணும். செக் 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 check, 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 check. 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 Check.
Delegates, it's a humble request.
Check.
Take your seat inside the indoor stadium.
Check. Check. Check.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Vaishnavi Patil, second year MAJ student. There is an echo, please check. Hello.
It's a 5-minute delay. We request our delegates to be just patient with us. There are some technical glitches and we are sorting it out.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Vaishnavi Patil, second year MAG student. It is an honor and privilege to introduce our esteemed panelists for today's discussion on media in contemporary political settings, the role of media in political polarization. In an era where media plays a crucial role in shaping political narratives and public opinion, this conversation is both timely and significant. Without further ado, let's welcome our distinguished panelists. Professor Vinod Pavrala is a senior professor of communication and UNESCO chair on community media at University of Hyderabad. Renowned for his work in community media, participatory communication, and social change. With extensive research in community radio and grassroots media initiatives, he has played a pivotal role in shaping media policies in India and beyond. He is a co-author of Other Voices, The Struggle for Community Radio in India, 2007, and serves as a co-editor of Journal of Alternative and Community Media. Professor Pavrala has been a visiting fellow at Loughborough University, UK, and Bologna University, Italy, and actively contributes to global media and development programs through advisory roles in prestigious institutions. I now invite Professor Vinod Pavrala to take the seat on the stage, who will also be moderating the session. Dr. Shashidhar Nanjundaya is a distinguished academic, media professional, and a researcher, currently serving as professor and dean at School of Digital Media and Communication, Mahindra University, with a PhD in mass communication and media arts from Southern Illinois University, USA. He has led reputed media institutes like Symbiosis Institute of Mass Communication and Indira School of Communication as director and dean. His expertise spans media policy, journalism, and digital communication with extensive editorial experience, including serving as a group executive editor for Pop Businesses and Policy magazines in Mumbai. An internationally recognized award-winning researcher, he authored the critically acclaimed monograph, New Aesthetics and Myth, 2023. Dr. Nanjundaya is an invited board member of International Council for Media Literacy and plays a key role in influential bodies, including the Fulbright Fellowship Selection Committee and the Governing Council of Advertising Standards Council of India. I now invite Dr. Shashidhar Nanjundaya to please take the seat on the stage. Professor Ujjwal K. Chowdhury is a Pro-Vice Chancellor and Dean, School of Media Communication and Fashion at Admas University, Kolkata. A distinguished academic and a media professional, he has led prestigious institutions like Symbiosis International University, MIT University, Pearl Academy, Whistling Woods International, and ISBM, with a rich career spanning journalism, media education, and consultancy. He has worked with Blitz, Business India Group, Z Group, Observer Group. He is also consulted for global institutions, including Consumer 51 USA, Amsterdam Film School, and media organizations in Nepal. A prolific columnist, he contributes to lead publications across India, Nepal, and Bangladesh. Recognized for his contributions to media education, he has received several prestigious awards, including Global Leadership in Communication and Hall of Fame in Communication Education. I now invite Professor Ujjwal K. Chowdhury to please take the seat on the stage. Dr. Asha Krishnaswamy is a veteran journalist, media trainer, and a content curator with over 2 decades of experience, including serving as a chief reporter and a political bureau head at Deccan Herald, Bengaluru. She has extensively covered Karnataka elections, policy processes, and civic issues, and has reported internationally, including the NAM Summit in Kuala Lumpur. Now an independent journalist and a political columnist, she also curates content for private companies, contributes to PR and political strategy firms, and serves as a visiting faculty and an external PhD guide. A recipient of multiple prestigious honors, including the Commonwealth Union's Harry Brittle Fellowship and the Karnataka Media Academy Best Journalist Award. She continues to shape journalism and media discourse in India. I now invite Dr. Asha Krishnaswamy to please take the seat on the stage. Professor Satish Kolluri is an associate professor of communication and media studies at Pace University, New York, specializing in digital cultures, Asian cinema, media satire, and civic engagement, holding a PhD in communication studies from the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. He has strong academic and research background in philosophy of communication, aesthetics, and cultural studies. An experienced educator, he teaches courses on intercultural communication, political communication, propaganda, and media criticism. His notable work includes Globalization, the American Classroom with Hong Kong on Bollywood Cinemas 2020. Professor Kolluri's research and teaching explore the intersections of media, culture, and politics, shaping discourse on contemporary communication studies. Thank you for joining us online, irrespective of the time difference, sir. I extend a warm welcome to you all. Now, I request Professor Vinod Pavrala to lead the session.
Yeah, I'm not still happy with this mic, but let me try. Am I audible at the back? Okay. So let me first thank the college and the organizers for putting together this international conference and inviting all of us. Thank you very much. So this panel is called Media in Contemporary Political Settings, Role of Media in Political Polarization. And we have 4 panelists who will hopefully bring in different aspects of the political polarization we see currently all over the world. I guess in some countries more than others. And the role of the media in that political polarization. Let me also, before I proceed further, welcome and thank Professor Satish Kolluri in particular, who is sitting at some ungodly hour in New York to join us. Welcome, Satish. Thanks for joining us. Okay, just to put out a few questions and pointers for this panel, and then I'll invite the panelists to make their remarks. So when we are talking about contemporary political settings and polarization, what we are essentially talking about is the nature of our democracy. Yeah, I mean, democracy is not what really we are discussing, right? But democracy is also a strange and complex animal. I mean, there are different ways in which one can talk about democracy. So when people say that India is the largest democracy, greatest democracy, somebody says we are the mother of all democracies or whatever, primarily they seem to be talking about an electoral democracy. You know, what some people have called an aggregative democracy, where people turn up at the voting booth every few years and vote for someone, right? So a democracy that works with elections primarily and voting, after which, of course, these voters can be forgotten for the next 5 years. And just before the next election is around the corner, then people come up with guarantees and schemes and so on. Suddenly citizens are remembered. Now, the other way in which one can discuss democracy is not in terms of voting, but in terms of talking, yeah, which is what political scientists have called deliberative democracy. Yeah, and when we talk about media and political polarization, we are primarily talking about what kind of a deliberative forum is our contemporary media, yeah, including the legacy media that we have known for decades and the more recent digital platforms. To what extent do they facilitate dialogue, debate? In the old, Habermasian tradition of having rational dialogue, reasoned debate, and people arrive at a consensus by arguing with each other on reasoned grounds, right? Now, if you have seen some of your favorite TV channels or not so favorite TV channels on primetime news, all that you get is a lot of people yelling at each other. And primetime anchors who are celebrities in their own rights, actually encouraging them to go at each other. Now, is that really reasoned debate, rational argumentation? Others are suggesting that the digital platforms that we now have, on which all of us are, more and more people, by the way, especially young people, are saying they get their news on social media. News on social media. Not that they just communicate with friends on social media, but they get news from social media. So what kind of news is that? What kind of online platforms do we all dwell in, right? That, we have been rich of legacy media and feel comfortable on these online platforms, right? Where many of us see other people like us who are saying similar things, who have similar ideologies, similar political views, and we are quite happy to be in a chat room with them, right? You pick your platform, whether it is Twitter, X, WhatsApp, or whatever. Now, there is a lot going on those platforms. A lot of exchanges going on, a lot of forwarding and posting discussions are apparently going on. But what kind of debates and discussions are going on within these chosen platforms in which all of us live and communicate, right? So many media scholars have pointed out that these have ultimately become echo chambers. People who are like us talking to us, and we are talking back in that forum. We are not really in platforms where we get to hear a diversity of views, political ideologies, discussions and debates, especially opinions and points of view which are not the same as what you believe in, right? And how important is that to listen to those other views and then engage in a reasoned deliberation and discussion, right? If the digital platforms have to become a truly Habermasian kind of a political public sphere. So whether the internet, with all its characteristics of platform capitalism, the amount of surveillance that the state and the market exercises over the digital platforms, are these platforms really conducive to counter political polarization, or they are actually contributing actively to political polarization? If we are not actively listening to each other and engaging in reasoned debates and arguments, we are only listening to our own kind. That can't be a recipe for countering reasoned debate, right? It becomes a platform for polarized debates and discussions. So these are some issues that we can talk about. And have the digital platforms really led to citizens becoming more and more active in public life, in civic engagement? Are people becoming more active in what is happening in their communities, in their cities, in their neighborhoods, or are they switching off? The American scholar Robert Putnam, who is credited with having coined the term social capital, wrote this famous book called Bowling Alone, where he bemoans that in American suburbia, people have basically switched off communities. It's become a very individualistic, capitalistic kind of society. And he uses the idea of going to the nearby shopping mall or to the bowling lanes and bowling all alone. You are not part of any community. So more recently, Putnam has been talking about posting alone on the internet digital sphere. So while you think that you are very well connected with a whole lot of people, it is also a deeply individualistic, lonely exercise, clicking those buttons, doing those forwarding and so on. So to what extent are these internet platforms promoting more and more individualistic, pushing people into their private bubbles rather than participate actively in public spaces, right? So these are some questions I thought I'll put forward. I won't go on much longer. I'll come back if needed at the end of the panelists' presentations. So let me first invite Professor Shashidhar Nanjundaya from Mahindra University to make his presentation. And what I suggest is we take about maybe like 12 to 15 minutes each for them to make their remarks so that they'll all have equal time. And then I'll ask the panelists to ask questions of each other, to respond to each other, and then we can open it up to the audience. Yeah, is that okay as a structure? Yeah, thank you. Shashi, you want to speak from there? Sure. Yeah, all the panelists, I mean, you can either feel free to come here and speak or you can use the hand mic and speak. Yeah.
Yeah. Namaskara, Mysuru. It's good to be back in Nammuru. Thank you so much for the to the organizers for providing this opportunity to me to be here on this panel. And thank you, Dr. Vinod Pavrala, for setting the agenda today. I will go back to two things that were spoken this morning, okay? And both have to do with something we can call inhibition. So inhibition is something that the act of inhibiting something, the act of suppressing something. And on the one hand, His Grace talked about how the new media, that is essentially, I mean, everything is mediated, it seems, and our artificial intelligence agencies or agents, and this, I think he was quoting the Vatican when he said it, are inhibiting the process of human thinking. So it's a process of almost a de-thinking process because it's doing all the thinking. Well, at least on the surface, that's what it would seem AI is doing to us. On the other hand, we then listen to Dr. Srinivas Melkote, who also talked about inhibition from the legacy media, which then were at that time top-down, one-way kind of communication, the kind of communication that Grunig hated. And he wanted to see this two-way symmetrical communication. It seems we have it. I don't think anybody is complaining that it's not just a two-way communication today, but it's multi-way, billions of ways in various directions and dimensions. And yet, it is really paradoxical that it seems that media after media, whether it's technology or whether it's the culture of the media, we are looking at the media and the ecosystem around it as something that inhibits. And we are saying that, and prominent scholars are saying this now because the facilitating aspect of communication with the media is a foregone conclusion. I mean, we were very gung-ho about it in those days when the media were new. No longer so. I mean, that's taken for granted. We live in communicative societies, it seems. I'm always drawn to Mark Doisey's book, Media Life, and his subsequent books along those lines of media ecology, where it seems that everything has to be mediated, and yet there is an inhibiting process. And some of that inhibiting process is embedded in our title today, which is, media and contemporary political settings, role of media and political polarization. So with that setting, my talk would be centered around a couple of aspects. And in those aspects, so I mean, it's there in that book if you want to see it. I call it distrust and politics, colon, because you can't do without a colon, interlinking two opposing forces in media. So that's essentially kind of the field that we want to set between two opposing, polar opposites. And I want to ask ourselves to clear the earth around this, to understand what assumptions we make in that structural way, which Vinod alluded to in his opening remarks. And one of those, I mean, I would like to mention three. I'm sure there are many, many more, but for our purposes, three would be a good number. One is democracy, which you mentioned. The idea that democracy is a superior form of life is an assumption. And that is an assumption that is often represented by the institutions of modernity, right? And therefore, what happens with that kind of an assumption, and I've already given two, which one is democracy, the other is the pursuit of modernity. And between that, if you have to enable both of these, you are actually assuming a huge amount, dollops and dollops of trust. So these are the three assumptions we make when we go about living in our communicative societies. However, what happens if these assumptions are disrupted? We heard about disruptions as well this morning. And that disruption can happen when when somebody raises distrust or in some form raises questions about the authority of, say, the media. That could be simply the politicians, because the politicians have the authority, have the mic in their hands, so to speak. They have all the voice that democracy has afforded them. So it is very easy, therefore, for politics to intervene in the workings of the media, first of all, the workings of a communicative society in general, right? And that seems to be, to me, the pivotal issue to talk about, right? So distrust, therefore, is the factor that comes to mind. I mean, because there is no stronger word for it. Can we become a Habermasian public sphere is what you asked, Vinod, earlier. And I believe that if distrust is the pivotal force at play today that's disrupting democracy, modernity, and trust, then the answer has to be that we need to re-examine what we really mean by this public sphere, whether that is democratic enough, and whether the Habermasian public sphere is not merely idealistic, but it is basically wrong. That representation itself is problematic. And what is politics without public representation, right? So what I did, therefore, was kind of list some factors of this distrust. So what goes into distrust? Why are we even talking about a distrust being a legitimate player in the proceedings in democracy? And can democracy, therefore, can the media, therefore, and can our communicative societies survive with distrust without the pivotal significance of institutional trust? And there's a book by Adam Seligman back in 1997. He recognized this problem and called his book The Problem of Trust, which in my book I refer to when I write about, because I flip everything. I flipped media literacy and called it so what's happening with media illiteracy? So my book is actually called, as Vaishnavi correctly mentioned, News Aesthetics and Myth, the making of media illiteracy in India. So how is illiteracy a made thing? How is it constructed? In the same way as trust is constructed and distrust is constructed. So these are deconstructive factors that we need to take into consideration when we deal with modern facets of democracy and modernity. So according to me, distrust is, of course, you can call it whatever you will. We live in the age of the prosumer. Many of you are media students or communication students. You might be familiar with this word, or you might not be familiar with this word. It's a portmanteau word that means a producer who's also a consumer. And we live in an environment that is driven by the sentiment of this prosumer who's constantly consuming, constantly producing, or at least reproducing. So the factors of distrust that I want to bring to light are essentially sociological. Okay, although and there are three again. One is the technological changes in our media ecosystem, including the advancement of AI logic to replace human logic. And that is, I think, what bothers us the most today. Is, are we being taken over by the logic of a machine as opposed to the logic? Are we getting subservient to human logic, to machine logic, which therefore becomes very easy for, say, a political party in power, especially, to manipulate the consumer sentiments, the prosumer sentiments, using what seems to be machine logic. So if you look at what algorithms are actually doing today, they make you think that this is what you actually like. They will convince you that this is what you actually like. But is that actually true? If you ask yourself, suddenly you don't know the answer. And that seems to be the crux of that problem with our technological changes in our environment. The second is the much more obvious political changes around the world, with more and more countries opting not to be democracies. Now that seems like an oxymoron of a statement. How can you elect governments that are undemocratic and even autocratic? In some cases, of course, we have seen this, we've probably even experienced it, that elected governments or elected political parties claim to be democracies and then turn into autocracies along the way. That is something where the voter really does not have the power to change in between elections. What happens if there is election fraud and your election does not count for anything? At that point, there is no way you can reverse your vote. There is no way you can change the government unless the government decides to step away from its powerful state. So that is the kind of political changes. And then now we are seeing it's much more easy to talk about America. So I'm going to talk about Trump. So what Trump, for example, is enabling today is a playbook that has largely become familiar to us. And in this playbook, the game of electoral politics might change in days, months, and years to come. As, for example, as simple as cutting of research funds from universities, by which America has been in the forefront of research and thought leadership. And if you cut that, what happens to For example, world thought leadership, and by which there is politics involved in that as well. And the third and the last one is the arrival of the alternative voice. This, of course, is more the resistance um, factor of distrust, which is that because of this alternative voice, that is the enabler by which we can perceive A and B, which is technological changes as well as changes in politics. This alternative voice, somebody was mentioning Ravish Kumar just now, probably in our private conversation. This alternative voice, I used to have a big problem with the word alternative when they said alternative media, of which of course you are a guru. And I said, what is alternative about it? Isn't that poised to be the mainstream? Why it resonates now back with me, the word alternative, is because we have seen the power of the so-called mainstream, even after the arrival of the alternative media. It has all the power to draw the line in terms of laws, in terms of regulations, and in terms of other ways that might be less direct and more insidious. So the arrival of the alternative voice, sure, and the social media influencer as a factor of mediated influence on the polity and on public opinion is the third factor of distrust rather than trust. Because this gives rise to this so-called marketplace of voices, right? And that marketplace usually operates on the basis of the loudest voice winning whatever it wants to win. So these are I mean, I want to end by just saying that it is time that we also start digging into why distrust is necessarily bad, why propaganda cannot be necessarily curbed as a matter of just trusting our existing institutions, and whether we need a completely restructuring of our thinking, or at least scholarly thoughts on polity and its relationship with our communicative societies. And with that, I end. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, we can come back and pick up on some of these issues that's been pointed out, idea of distrust and the role of the media in that. So let's move to our next presentation, which is by Dr. Ujjwal Chaudhary. You want to come here? Yeah.
Yeah, first of all, a really heartfelt thanks to St. Philomena's College. Normally a college for a department which may not be the largest department of the college does not spend so much money to organize an international conference, fly down every panelist and organize a stay in the city for 4 days. Indeed, a big job done. And also the quality of the panelists, as you'll find throughout the 2 days, is of high quality. Thank you very much, Professor Gowda and Professor Dr. Vagdevi for, and in my language, Vagdevi is the name for Saraswati. I think it's the same thing here. So thank you very much for doing what you are doing fabulously. Professor Melkote had spoken about the last 45 years of media and how it has changed. If I can take from 1975 to 2025, the last 50 years, larger part of this last quarter century of the last century, 75 to 2000, the dominance of the print media in the mind of the people was almost absolute. There was the electronic media, but the private electronic media in India started from 2004 onwards only, 2002 onwards only, with Z News coming in. And then there was a private news bulletin, even in Doordarshan. If you remember, NDTV's first telecast was from Doordarshan platform. So print media was, so anything which is printed, which is in print, jo chapa, wo vishwas yogya hai. So anything printed is to be believed. And very soon, with the turn of the century from 2000, anything shown is to be believed. So television became the more quote unquote trustworthy, gradually somewhat legacy medium. Radio was never explored fully. I hope one of the gurus of radio is Binod sir, and he will agree that the potential, the power of radio, the way community radio has come up, the way city-based radio has come up in the Western world has never been actually explored in India. So television became the face, the dominant face of medium. Jo dikhta hai, wo bikta hai, sort of attitude. But since the pandemic, since we were all put together forcefully in the largest quarantine of the world ever in history, from that time, it's the web that has come up in a big way, also supported by, which started earlier but continued, cheap internet through Geo, which was forced to be followed up by the other telecom services. So this, since pandemic, increasingly the social media and the online communication became a dominant factor. It is almost so dominant that you read the newspaper, but you read the newspaper in its e-form on the mobile. You listen to the television, but you listen to the snacking of the news in small capsules on your mobile. So it's the mobile which has become the platform to bring even the newspaper and the television actually at this point of time. Yes, it has led to democratization of media. It has been mentioned already here in the keynote address also. Democratization of media has happened, but at a cost. At a cost because the gatekeepers are gone. Agenda setting has become millions, and anyone can actually use this medium. I mean, today I was in the morning at 7 o'clock at Raghavendra Swami Mool Mutt, and I put it on the social media. By now, my analytics tell that 11,000 people have seen the post. So, I mean, it was unthinkable 20 years ago, 15 years ago, that a simple visit to a temple can actually be seen in 3 or 4 hours by 10K plus people. But this is the reality. Its democratization is there. But along with that, there is a floodgate of misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. When there is a WhatsApp forward we got, if you remember, during the pandemic, Jan Gan Man has been voted to be the #1 anthem of the world by UNESCO. I hope many of us got it. It's a misinformation. UNESCO does not have the job of voting a national anthem as the best or a prime minister as the best of the world. UNESCO does never do that. Nobody asked the source. Nobody asked a link of the UNESCO website to prove it. But then people believed it. It did not create harms to anyone. It made us feel a little happy. Oh, well, our national anthem is the best. Misinformation, but not so harmful. Then came disinformation. One small example, this, and mal have created the source of extreme political polarization that we're talking about. The second, disinformation, for example. You remember the story of the case of Sushant Rajput's murder, or sorry, suicide. Now, it has not been still now confirmed whether it was suicide or murder, but by all circumstances looks like suicide. And in that case, his girlfriend Riya Chakravarti was dragged to the court. Nothing could be proven, but media trial happened. Lots of stories were cooked by individuals and spread. One middle-class family of an Air Force officer, Riya's father is a retired Air Force officer, was totally ruined. And coming now, looking back, there's nothing that was proven against her. She and her brother were arrested, and then they were released also. Same thing happened with the son of Shah Rukh Khan. Nothing was proven. The court said that nothing was proven, so he is released. Nobody said sorry even. So these are disinformation, which creates troubles for some people, spreading that in such a manner, sometimes by people in power, sometimes by people in opposition, sometimes by powerful lobbies in the society. And then there is a extreme disinformation. If you remember the killing of Akhlaq on the charge of Usman Akhlaq on the charge of beef in his refrigerator, or the killing of Pehlu Khan, who was just going to a market to sell his oxen, 2 oxen, or the killing of Junaid, a young boy, or the killing of the 2 monks in Panvel. All these are result of disinformation, and killings happen due to that. There are bloodbaths in the stock market due to such disinformation many a time. So these have become a sort of ground for creating polarization. This decline of the legacy media, or as trust or mistrust, or lack of trust, as Dr. Shashidhar says, on the traditional media, is one of the factors of the rise behind the, I do not want to use the alternate media word, a rise behind the social media, the online media, and is creating a scenario where it seems that all aspects of our life, even what we shall eat, how much exercise we should do, and what is true love, everything we have to learn from social media. So it started with 180-degree media, when we said television, radio, print. Then came 360-degree media, when we added outdoor with a little bit of internet and all that. Now it's 760-degree media, when we add WhatsApp, virality, something going viral. When we add all forms of social media, then it becomes 760-degree media. Sounds very nice, music to the ears, from 180 to 760. Journey from a trustworthy legacy media to mistrusted or distrusted legacy media, and often a harmful social media. That's the journey from 180 to 720. The next point that I would like to draw your attention to is attention economy. Why is it happening? Because earlier, the revenue of the media dependent on the number of people who read this. I mean, circulation figure, if you remember, ABC was a big factor, Audit Bureau of Circulation. Big factor in determining the rate of the advertisement. ABC is not even heard now. TRP has been the big factor. Nobody has seen a people meter. Nobody in this audience can claim that I have seen that people meter by which TRP is calculated. But that was the big factor in determining the revenue rates. So today the revenue is, because it's online largely, is actually verifiable. And there are several Google Analytics tools to verify which portal, which news is doing the best. And doing the best definition is not the most trustworthy. Doing the best because has gone viral. Has gone viral. So therefore, attention economy, the algorithms are driving engagement. So there's a joke. One person wrote on, again, social media, that I asked, what is, just for my, just for fun, I asked the internet to Google, what is the usual price of a helicopter? Google gave an answer. But from the next moment, I started getting, you saw that, I started getting ads about luxury islands, about a house of few crores somewhere, because the algorithm captured that I'm a potential buyer of a helicopter. Then to stop that, I asked, where can I get the cheapest Parker pen in my city? The answer came. And after that, all the ads have been 340 rupees for a leather chappal. And with that, you get a free rubber chappal as well. So the algorithms is driving the engagement. And when algorithms drive engagement, truth is not the criterion. Popularity is the criterion. Virality is the criterion. And falsehood gallops. Truth comes limping slowly behind. Truth is a casualty of such virality. It's the falsehood on which it stands. So if you get any media free, for example, people say that I get a 28 rupees Times of India production produced paper, 28 rupees per piece, I get at 5 rupees. Or I get the internet free almost. I get so much social media free. When you get something free, you are the product. You are the product of someone. So therefore, eyeballs in the new media is the new media currency. Eyeballs is the new media currency because of cheap internet. You know, there is a new sort of revolution happening just now in the last 20 days, Grok AI. You must have heard about it. You ask questions and it exposes anyone and everyone. It is being brought by Elon Musk company. And if you ask, someone was asked the Grok, Who is the celebrity which has done maximum falsehood on social media? Number one is Elon Musk. Grok is telling, which is established by Elon Musk's company. So therefore, we have come to a situation where algorithm is driving echo chambers. So if I believe in certain thing and have searched for those things, I will be always given similar line of thinking continuously in news items. And when you have these echo chambers, polarization keeps on increasing. So there is a pro something and anti something which keeps on happening. And this is followed up by the TV channels also. They've understood that create echo chambers, feed on to your audiences, which are already polarized, and you are number one on the chart of the popularity. Republic TV, example. Times now started doing that, and the man behind Times now moved to Republic TV. Now Republic TV does it even better, quote unquote better. European online news platforms like Breitbart News or Gefira, they do the have come. Obama is of Indonesian Muslim origin. This became the most popular viral news when Obama's election was going on. He had to put his, and the name was given Barack Hussein Obama, and he had to put his birth certificate online to prove that it is wrong. Make America great again sounds very sweet. How do you do that? Immigrants consuming maximum resources and are more prone to crime. So anti-immigrant positioning. So you create an enemy, us and them, and show them to win the vote for the us. That's how polarization has increased and media has increased that. Mangal Sutra, operation if he wins, will snatch away your Mangal Sutra. Someone says and the media amplifies. And it as if it becomes a truth. Social media amplification of these narratives actually increases further polarization. Communal narratives led to Father Stain's burning. Love jihad narrative. The Central Home Ministry says there is no proven record of love jihad. There is interfaith marriages which are consensual. Urban Naxals, again, Central Home Ministry under the current government says there is no concept as urban Naxal in the police records. The Kerala story and the claim of mass conversion, the state government's investigation has proven definitely that there is less than 100 such conversions. So therefore, this traditional media is being ignored by those who want polarization, and they often do not even give any press conference as well from various nations, whether Putin to Modi. That's the reality. And hence, extreme political narratives are creating this polarization. Way out, 1 minute, I'll take more for the way out. Anything which goes beyond a point has a decline. So therefore, when we are seeing political polarization and the domestication of media, there is a limit to that. But let that limit come at the right time. At the academic level, at the social activism level that we all are in, what can we do? Dialogue focus. So we often do not do dialogues with those with whom we differ. It's important to actually do dialogues, and media should be a platform for that. Moderation and fact check, media literacy, critical thinking exercises without defining them. And my very quarter century friend, Dr. Shashidhar, has a book on media literacy. It's important that we actually make media literacy a dominant part of all our courses, not just for media, beyond media as well. Solutions journalism, development communication, anti-fake movement, which Meta and Google are doing, Factshala and all that, and learning media revenues. One of the biggest things that I would like to note, our education teaches what is media, how to create media content, does not teach how to sell media content. It teaches us to start a YouTube channel, does not teach us monetization of YouTube channel. If we start learning media revenues and start looking at alternative business models, then perhaps this algorithm-based, virality-based, negativity-based media can be stopped. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ujjwal Chaudhary. I mean, one of the things that is said about truth becoming a casualty, I mean, if you recall, I mean, I don't know, our memories seem to be very short these days, but 2016 presidential election in the US is when this we are now in a world of post-factual politics, because where politics doesn't have to be based on anything called truth, right? It is your facts versus my facts. And if any of you are following what is happening in the United States, I mean, there is a riveting running story of the unraveling of democracy. Some might say systematic dismantling of democracy that's happening in the US in the last 2 months. And Professor Satish Kolluri is probably best placed to give us a little window to what's happening there and to give us a perspective on political polarization and media. Satish, over to you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you, Vinod. Thank you, Srinivas Melkote, for including me in this conference. Thank you to Venu and Vagdevi too, for organizing such an amazing conference. And I think there's an amazing thread that is running through right from the time the Reverend Father spoke. And then you had Mr. Gurudas talking about AI, and then Vinod and Srinivas talking about communication, and its development. So what I thought was, to kind of start off with a question that I posed in my abstract. I mean, how does the radical shift in geopolitics that we have witnessed to in today's algorithmically driven, attention-challenged world necessitates a closer look at traditional theories of political communication. So theories of communication that found applicability during the time of legacy media now have to adapt themselves to new ways of dealing with digital media. So that's the other part of it which has changed, right? And also, when we talk about news gathering, gatekeeping, citizen journalism, we are looking at it in the context of the decline in democratic values and human rights, and with a very disconcerting rise in white supremacist movements in the US especially, and also parts of Europe. During my talk, actually, we can draw parallels to situations in India. And sometimes you might have to tweak it a little bit, but it does fit here. Okay, so what I thought was talk about the deficits of democracy. Since we are talking about democracy, no country has a perfect democracy. In fact, a very famous psychoanalyst, Slavoj Žižek, said democracy is a sublime object of ideology. It's almost unattainable. And so even here, we have democracy that is absolutely checkered in America. And like Vinod said, things are not looking very good at all. Let me start off with my intellectual guru, Stuart Hall, with his term called articulation, where he talks about a link or a connection which is not necessarily given in all cases as a law or a fact of life, but which requires particular conditions of existence to appear at all, which has to be positively sustained by specific processes, which is not eternal, but has to be constantly renewed, which can, under some circumstances, disappear or be overthrown, leading to the old linkages being dissolved and new connections, rearticulations being forged. It is also important that an articulation between different practices does not mean that they become identical or that one is dissolved into each other. Each retains its distinct determinations and conditions of existence. However, once an articulation is made, the two practices can function together, not as an immediate identity, but as distinctions within a unity. And so the theme of the conference, when you're looking at it in terms of politics, sociology, and economics, it kind of brings me to articulation where you can look at them in complementary terms. There are distinctions there, but at one level, you want to dissolve everything because it just says at the end of the day, it's the base superstructure of the political economy, but then you'll have to tease it out. And so for me, a more modern reflection of that could be intersectional thinking, where we are looking at politics, economics, and sociology, without dissolving one with the other, right? So we are kind of maintaining that semantic difference and also disciplinary difference in some ways. So President Donald Trump, according to HuffPost, has been on a collision course with the federal judiciary. He's really testing the Constitution, and he's dismantling, as Vinod said, the government systematically, clinically, with Elon Musk, who's, by the way, unelected. And so American democracy has a checkered history. The country was founded not as a democratic society, contrary to popular belief, but through slavery and Jim Crow's laws. And the full democracy, or the world's oldest democracy, is actually an oligarchy. One can argue that even India is an oligarchy, where you have four individuals effectively running the country: the home minister, the prime minister, and then you have the two industrialists. So that's an oligarchy for me. And you have the Elon Musk and the billionaire class. That, by the way, also supports the Democratic Party. So it's not just to put the Republicans in the spot here. So we are in America a flawed democracy, very much. And in fact, study after study shows that we are now an authoritarian oligarchy. So that is kind of unreal or very surreal to hear when we're talking about America as the beacon of freedom and democracy and human rights. But that is not really the case anymore. And so when we talk about deficits, we're talking about money, American politics being completely awash in money, where Musk spent $300 million on Trump's campaign. Harris spent $2 billion, and God knows what happened to those $2 billion. Then she ended up losing the campaign, the election itself. And then we have a system called lobbying, which basically involves corporations using lobbies to write public policy. And that, unfortunately, is very much the case. That has been the case since lobbying it became part of the political process. So we actually have a street in DC called K Street, where all the lobbyist offices are located. And then, of course, the other deficit one can talk about is whether the will of the people is adequately represented, and it is not. Thanks to gerrymandering, where districts are basically drawn up by politicians, by representatives to suit their own needs. And then the will of the people, for instance, in today's presidential term, is not being represented as Elon Musk claims that the will of the people. We are actually carrying out the will of the people, and that's not really the case, because if it is truly the will of the people, then the president has to work with the Congress and come to kind of a consensus about policy, and that is not really happening. And so it is very, very interesting when you look at gerrymandering. I was just thinking about how the Electoral Commission in India has been kind of hijacked by the ruling party, and how the ruling party ends up breaking up state governments through political defections. And so I can imagine a kind of a parallel there in India in terms of how a party in power tries to sustain it or try to maintain it, right? And so we also have, when you talk about political polarization, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. You have to look at it in geographical terms. So you have the North-South divide operating even in America like it does there. But the script is flipped here. It's the North that subsidizes the South. So New York has a population of about 27 or 28 million, and it subsidizes almost about 8 or 9 states, including Alabama, Mississippi. And so our tax money goes to helping out the red states in the South. In India, it's the opposite, where it's the South that subsidizes the North, right? And so you have Bihar, which has a population of 104 million, and then Tamil Nadu, which has 72 million. And so now it's very, very interesting who subsidizes who. And in this context, when we talk about political polarization and talks of conversations, living room conversations about secession, especially on my last visit, which was quite fascinating. I was thinking of the delimitation going on right now in India, where the South is fearing the loss of parliamentary seats. And obviously, you can see some resistance there. And that again is going to be a big problem. So when we talk about polarization, it's kind of driven a wedge through American politics, but political polarization has always been there in America. Conservative radio has always played a big role in polarizing the population. And then after that, Fox News came in with Rupert Murdoch and then further exacerbated the differences. And the left or the liberal center left used to dominate airwaves, and the radio was dominated by conservatives like Rush Limbaugh. And that's completely changed now because we are now in the digital era and everybody has access to the mic. So we are talking about, how political polarization basically has been exacerbated by legacy media and by digital media. And we also look at voting participation and voting suppression in America. And that's a huge thing. And like in India, where voters are struck off the rolls, like the recent Delhi elections I was reading about, thousands of them not being able to vote. And the voter suppression in here too in America, it's very common, especially to prevent African Americans from voting. And so the playing field is very frayed in America. It is not really an even playing field, even when you look at it through the lens of gender. Forget about the kind of money one invests in winning elections. So extreme polarization has become a major reason, and that is why you have what is called the decline of tolerance. Um, Trump's 2016, like Vinod was talking about, Trump's 2016 election basically eroded trust in democracy. He claimed that the election was stolen. So we all know that story. And we all know that it was disinformation that was, carried out with malice, as opposed to misinformation that could be unwitting in terms of, how people share it. And so you have that kind of deficit that is, those kind of deficits that are very much part of a democracy. And now, whether these deficits can apply to an Indian context or another South Asian country, that is something that is up to students of communication, political communication, because it'll be fascinating to study something like delimitation or coalition building or breaking or defections, and how it works and the kind of role media plays. And so we can look at it, political science through through the lens of data science, which is what is happening in terms of how political science is being honed to the to the T to predict voting behavior. But for me personally, I prefer looking at political science through political psychology and psychoanalysis because it is much more revealing. And this takes me back to the opening line of the Reverend Father who said, "I'm not a communication expert." And that is such an interesting thing because we always are looking at communication through a third person perspective. And we are always seeking validation from experiments. So we forget to count ourselves in. And obviously, the Reverend Father is a master communicator because he's a preacher too. He speaks to thousands of people. And so the problem with doing communication research, especially political communication research, and we talk about inherent political biases, is that we forget to count ourselves in as researchers. And I think it is important for us to include ourselves in that conversation when we talk about, polarization and living in echo chambers or living in silos or living in segregated places where now in America, cities and towns have become blue in the Northeast and other parts of California. And so if you look at the map of America, you have all the most populated parts of America are all blue and the rest of the rural areas are all red. And so living is also kind of segregated. So polarization also affects how people live. And that is something out of choice. So because you do want to send your kid to a school district that is diverse, as opposed to being very homogeneous in terms of color, right? So the third person effect theory, I think, is effective. I mean, it is good. But at the same time, I think one also has to look at communication, look at politics through one's first person, kind of include ourselves in that conversation in terms of one's own inherent biases. And how did I say, for instance, myself, how did I land up in this particular echo chamber, right? My ideology, my own political leanings. And so And this is also something very interesting in terms of media effects. I was thinking about how maybe we should kind of go back to limited effects theory and see whether media really has the kind of effects that are made out to be, or are we not really affected by media, right? Or does media have limited effects? So that's something that is, a question that we can ask. And so, the kind of a question that also that comes up for me is whether reality has a liberal or a conservative bias. Right now, I mean, having been in this country since 1987, we always grew up with this conventional wisdom that reality has a liberal bias. But now I can say that reality has a conservative bias because the way it is being socially constructed through the White House, through the news media sources that have been allowed to come to the White House, that's a completely different story right now. AP, all the legacy media have been kicked out, right? They've all been kicked out. So it's a kind of a thing where one can ask that question about how we construct social reality and whether the reality has an inherent bias built into it. And so we can look at it through sociology, we can look at it through a mass comm perspective, we can look at it through uh, 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 um, um, media effects perspective, where, to go back to what Srinivas was talking about, the hot medium and the cool medium of McLuhan, where now we are, looking at the hot and the cool and how they would apply to legacy and the digital media right now in terms of being filled with data and not being able to really, really figure out. So the hot medium right now is something that is not allowing us to digest and have a dialogue or a debate. So that is something that is worth looking at, just in terms of how we digest and process information. And another approach I think is very important is also the psychological approach, because it has a lot to do with how we approach. Yeah,
Would
2 minutes.
would you like to take a minute or two to
Yeah, 2 minutes. I'm
close your
winding up.
remarks? Yeah.
Yeah. And also psychological approach, I think it has a lot to do with our values, our beliefs, our morals. And so people kind of tend to ignore this. And this is for me very, very important, because in my own classroom, when we talk about values and beliefs, they're very, very transparent and honest in terms of how values, religious values especially, have played a big role in their own political formations growing up. And so for me, political psychology is also associated with morality. And morality is something that we kind of do not talk about in politics, because we do make decisions based on our morals, our values, and our beliefs. And that is very, very important to acknowledge. So the approaches, economic, social, or the political economy approach, for instance, which, who owns what, these are the kind of approaches that you can kind of lay out. In addition to, of course, what I would call the political satire approach, which makes politics accessible and easy to students, especially undergrads. If these are the kind of approaches that you can kind of lay out as a template to ground political polarization. So how does polarization occur across these approaches? So that's one way of looking at it. Thanks a lot for listening to me. Thank you so much.
Satish, thank you so much. Hope you can be awake and be with us for some more time.
Yeah.
We have one more presentation, and hopefully
absolutely. No. I'm
questions for
awake.
you.
No problem. Absolutely no problem. Thank you.
So may I now invite Dr. Asha Krishnaswamy to make her presentation?
ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ಎಷ್ಟು ಜನಕ್ಕೆ ಸ್ಟೂಡೆಂಟ್ಸ್, ಐ ಸಿ ಲಾಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಸ್ಟೂಡೆಂಟ್ಸ್, ಹೌ ಮೆನಿ ಆಫ್ ಯು ಆರ್ ಇಂಟ್ರೆಸ್ಟೆಡ್ ಇನ್ ಸ್ಟಿಲ್ ಸಿಟ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ಅಂಡ್ forgetting your food? You have to sit for some more time. Is it okay? I want you to be participatory. This one you are just listening. So later keep your questions ready. I think almost all aspects of polarization has been mentioned here or discussed at length. I don't want to touch any of those subjects again, because they're all scholars. They know the subject well. I had to recall my Professor Usha Rani is here. When I sat before her in Mysore University for my PhD subject discussion, my subject was new media, usage of new media by politicians of Karnataka. She had no opinion about that. What she asked me made me think. She said, "What do you mean by politics?" I, being a political correspondent, I said elections, politicians. I went on blabbering. She said, first go and read what is the definition of politics. Come back to me after 1 year. Let me see how much you will read. That made me read in depth about the politics. For students, I'm saying this. Politics is not party politics alone. It is policy process. Why I'm talking about this is if you consider policy process, that is the biggest polarization that is happening in this country, especially in Karnataka. We are seeing, I'll give you some examples. In April 22, a businesswoman, Kiran Mazumdar, gave a statement saying, she tweeted to Chief Minister at that time, Mr. Bommai. She said this government is allowing growing religious differences in society. There is a lot of discussion, debate on that in media and in political circles. Now, we have 4% reservation for minorities in government tenders. There is no response from business community or anybody on that, except media is debating to a certain extent. If government goes on polarizing people, even after so many years of independence, where are we heading to? We still debate hostels for scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, minorities, women, everything separate. Who is creating colony? It is not just media. Media is also part of society. It is like police department is also part of society. We are also part of society. And we are discussing a lot of trust issues in media. The whole society, you take any profession, it has lost trust, I think. Doctors, earlier, whatever doctors used to give medicine, we used to gulp. We had a lot of trust. Now we go for second, third, fourth opinion. Doctor himself, primary doctor, he will say that you won't take second opinion. So trust is, paucity of trust is there in every field of life or society. That has to be factored when we are discussing policy and politics and then polarization. Elections is the biggest polarization in this country or any country. Today, US, I don't know whether it is elected prime minister or it is Elon Musk who is running the show there. And see how, I mean, I and Professor Usha Rani, we wrote one paper on social media usage in 2004 elections. And then we compared how new media usage by Mr. Modi and Mr. IT czar Nandan Nilekani. Nandan Nilekani lost elections badly despite a team of techies going behind him and giving a lot of publicity. He couldn't win. But without what you call conventional media, there is nothing called traditional media, conventional media, or legacy media now anymore, because the walls between media sections in newsroom has been broken, because it is integrated media we have. Whatever that appears on Twitter, it becomes a big story. If we have time, we will do an analysis also. So it is not, for me, the concerns are polarization of mind. That is where the things are, we have to look at it. It is, for me, technology, I have no problems with technology. No technology is bad, whether it is AI or whatever platforms. These are all platforms or tools which we use. But if the mind is corrupt, if the mind is made to accept all sorts of polarization, commissioned polarization, institutionalized polarization, that is where we succumb to it. And then how do we come out of it? How do we tell children, see, there is one, let me be very practical in this session. there is one advertisement by Media Academy, which offers media kit only to certain sections of society. It has been circulated in the last 2-3 days. A student called me. I am also poor. Can I apply? Who is polarizing now? It is government media body. What answers do you have for that? We can always argue. We can always justify saying social economic background. Coming to the media which we consume, whether it is polarized or not. Again, for IGNO, Professor Usha ma'am asked me to write a chapter on selectivity theory. At that time, I started reading a lot of psychology. The psychology was also discussed here. People are very selective in selection of stories or reading. They have become, that is what is media is reflecting what is happening in society, or is it there to set an agenda? There is always a dilemma. Are we here to set an agenda, or are we going to reflect what is happening in society? Who is controlling the media? It could be, I do say that it is money factor which works finally. If I don't survey, see who killed media during COVID? It is people who killed the traditional media. They are ready to spend thousands of rupees or hundreds of rupees on food, but they don't want to spend 5 rupees on newspaper. They weaved a lot of stories and they almost killed the print media. Now what we are seeing is commercialization of media, we say, and then it is polarization. Again, I tell you, government departments gives advertisement to papers which align with their thinking. They are not seeing media as a comprehensive one. Again, it is polarization that is happening. So when we look at all these things, and for me, polarization should stop from the top. Then, youngsters will, all are equal, we say, but it is not happening when then we come out with socio-economic theories or the struggles they underwent. But this cherry picking of stories or facts is happening mainly because there is a lot of disparities, lot of even giving advertisement. I mean, this was unheard, So earlier, see, when I started my career in Deccan Herald, we were told not to mention certain sections of society. Even when Bangalore is burning, don't write because it will fuel violence. Don't mention. When the visual media came, my editor at that time was Mr. K.N. Harikumar, a total leftist and JNU product. And he called and told us the certain parts of Bangalore was under curfew. He said, you mentioned the community name. The whole newsroom was taken aback. He said, with whom we are competing? We are competing with televisions today. I had to convey what is happening in the city to my readers. Don't try to mask or hide the name. Then we were under a lot of scrutiny at that time. But today, with visual media being so powerful, print or any media cannot, even if let us assume that I tell youngsters, if a paper blocks or a television channel blocks certain news, don't you consume? You form an opinion, right? You will have opinion. So how you use social media, how you use technology is left to you. But who gives that discretion power? Day before yesterday, there was on Guardian has reported one totally AI generated newspaper has come. Yeah, in Italy. Where is the discretion then? Selection of stories or giving a spin to a story or taking an angle, giving an angle to it. Where is my ashaness or anybody's contribution to that kind of situation? So we are in a there are so many dimensions to this subject. There are many dimensions. We cannot say that, this is one thing is happening. That is the reason why everything is bad or everything is good is happening. India has seen a prime minister who has kept away from so-called conventional media, and he has still been winning. Social media directly, he is connecting to people. That is the power of social media. If I keep away from it, where do I end up? That is this one. Polarization is per se this distrust has been there, polarization has been there. If we go through the newspapers of during independence, at that time you will see Indian media never covered what was happening in Pakistan. That time was also human interest stories didn't come. Human agony was not reflected. Polarization was there. Now you will see we are seeing more because of social media. This polarization has been there. It is not new. As he and others said, echo chambers are there now. So we think that it is too much now. It is getting circulated. See one take, and then mass media, digital media, everything is one media now. We are looking at seeing integrated media now. So yeah, and that is where, when we discuss media as such, I want to distinguish between regulated media and unregulated media. Are we discussing regulated media, or we are discussing everybody who holds a mobile phone becomes a journalist, becomes a content creator? So when we discuss, this is a time for us to see whether we can have some regulation when it comes to usage of media platforms. That is where we had to debate, discuss. I think that let us apply mind towards that also. That's where I end, because we are already one. I think we can go on talking. So many examples I can give and show that how polarized society is and who are people responsible. It is not just media. That is what I want to tell.
Okay, I think I won't say anything by way of summarizing all these interesting arguments. We'll just go to the audience. I hope students have some tough questions. Yeah, please. We have one question already. Just mention who the question is to. Yeah.
I'm Ashwini here. Ma'am, excuse me if I make any mistake, Usha ma'am here. I have two questions. One is to Professor Nanjundaya. When we talk about techno-ethics in AI, my question is, these algorithms are made by the technicians. So there is no involvement of users there. So can there be any algorithmic bias from them, from the technicians' part? Is there any hidden agenda by them? So my first question is that. And second question is to Professor Ujjwal Chaudhary. Sir, thank you for the wonderful talk. I really enjoyed the lot of examples. I could connect to it. So my question is, when we talk about social media and its consumption and a lot of disinformation associated to it, is there any take on the policy interventions that we can do for that? So I would like to hear on that.
Hi, my name is Swati Bakshi, and I'm talking from experience because I'm an insider. I've been a journalist for a long time. And my question actually relates to Ashwini as well. The thing about algorithms is that they are not created by media people. They are created by communication engineers, and they are discussing reimagining communication without their participation. So that says a lot, that we cannot reimagine communication without their participation anymore. Do you think that is the way ahead? Sorry. Yeah, so and this is like firefighting without any fire around, because we do not have a direct communication to people who are actually creating those infrastructures that create these biases, what Ashwini was talking about, and how it polarizes, and just the examples that you were giving, that it just pushes that similar kind of communication to you. So it's unwanted communication mostly that algorithm gives you? That's one thing. That's my question. And second question is, can we say that this is actually not the crisis of communication, but it's actually the crisis of technology that failed democracy? Because we thought that democratizing technology, this is what is, it is all about democratizing technology, giving it to everyone to make what they want out of it. But it is this that has actually failed democracy. Don't you think so? So those are Swati Bakshi.
Hello. Hello, good afternoon. Myself, Syed Nawaz, and I'm a commerce student specializing in finance, and I'm a geopolitics analyst. I have a key interest in media influence and economic and political narratives. My question is, media plays is a crucial role in shaping public perception and policy making in developing economics. It can attract investments, derive cases, and attract reforms and empower citizens. But it can also contribute to misinformation and economic instability. Given the dual impact, what steps to be taken to ensure that serves its constructive force to economic growth and development rather than tool of polarization and misinformation, as our country is an already a developing nation? Sir, I'm asking this question for all the 4 members there. Yeah. So media plays a crucial role in shaping public perception and policy making and developing economics. In many cases, it can attract investments, drive reforms, and empower citizens. But it can also contribute to misinformation and economic instability.
One question I had for Satish. Satish, could you share a little bit about what's happening to the media in the last few months? I mean, there is also an assault on media and media freedoms from the White House now, right? What's happening with the legacy media and the disproportionately large influence that's now being given to YouTubers and the online news platforms and so on. So yeah, keep the question in mind, and maybe after they answer the questions, you could take a shot at this. Yeah, thank you. So we'll start with Sashi, you could, and then Ujjwal.
Okay. Ashwini's question, I think we met in Delhi. Did we meet in Delhi? Okay. About techno ethics and human bias. And I think Swati had a very similar question. Very fascinatingly, she asks, is this a crisis of communication or is it a crisis of technology? I think the answer to the first question is kind of straightforward from my side, in that when we say, and just to complicate your question, is there something called algorithmic bias? That was what I would pose the question as. Or is that basically human bias manifesting itself through algorithms? And that, I think, is a great question. In fact, there is a little by way of ambiguity there. It is the human bias, of course, it's the programmer's bias. I always tell some of my students, imagine the scenario if tomorrow's algorithms were to give you the opposite of what you consume. That is to say, what Dr. Ujjwal Chaudhary was just saying, the example about, you consume something, you ask about something high life product, and it'll give you the algorithm thinks that you are billionaire, what would happen if the opposite were to happen through algorithms? That is to say, if you asked about, I don't know, why is Rahul Gandhi called a pappu, and the algorithm gives you the opposite. I mean, it gives you the answer. Grok now is doing it. Grok actually acts more like human beings. Yeah. So what happens if the algorithm turns around and gives you the opposite perspective? What happens to polarization then? And what happens to the concept that algorithms, so the entire concept of human bias behind algorithms can be challenged merely by reprogramming the algorithms. And that, I think, is something that we want to consider going forward. And you're right, Grok in a way does it, although Grok is more like a troll sometimes, because it gives you, so first of all, the language just gives you back. You give it a gali and it gives you a gali back. On the other hand, it also is, it claims to be very objective. I don't think it's very objective. It needs some objectivity attached to it. Otherwise, it will be categorized as anti-establishment. So just on the thing of crisis of communication and crisis of technology, I think it's a great question. I don't have an answer to it, but I believe that one is related to the other in that without, I mean, we have all been talking about Marshall McLuhan and the entire extension of man, the media being the extension of man or human. And so the crisis of technology is the crisis of communication. There is a crisis in both because of each other. So without a crisis in communication, we would not really be seeing a crisis in technology. Let's also acknowledge that part, not just the other way around, that just because there is a crisis in technology, there's a crisis in communication. That part is kind of obvious, I think. But the other question, the fact that there is a crisis in technology because of the crisis in communication is something that I would actually consider for a research paper, maybe.
That was a great McLuhan-esque answer, talking of technology and communication.
Ashwini, I work for a political agency which is functioning in many countries. What I noticed was this algorithms, according to convenience, it can be manipulated. Top technicians are, techies are employed.
So first of all, answers to your question. Thank you for the compliment anyway. Policy intervention and social media. That was your question, right? More than the government, in a mature democracy. Now that's always a debatable question. How much matured is our democracy? But in a mature democracy, it should be self-regulation rather than the government regulating us. And the shenanigans in the government are not necessarily those who will be more informed than, let's say, an expert like Vinodji. So there's a bureaucrat who will be doing that. So it's not the experts who will be doing that. So therefore, self-regulation. I am really saddened by the fact that Meta is dismantling its layers of self-regulation, its layers of what they call as fact-check self-guards. It's actually dismantling. That's a very sad thing. In fact, it should increase. Why is it that you consider Indian Express stories usually more investigative? Why is it that you consider the Hindu stories more journalistic? Why is it that you consider Times of India more commercial? So there have been stories, there's history to that. So there has to be self-regulation, point one. Point two, UNESCO recently came out with a guidelines in 2024 where they're talking about transparency in algorithm technology. So they're calling about how that transparency can be brought in. So therefore, this is also a point. We can actually create mechanisms within the system by which comparative bias, less of bias, unbiasedness could be maintained. Now, on this issue that algorithm is a tech dimension, I do not fully agree. This is a blend of technology, communication, and business. Algorithm is business outcome. That is the focus. Algorithms are created in business interest primarily. It's communication because it picks and chooses, and it's also technology because that's the process through which it happens. There was a question on economic polarization. That's good indeed. I'm educated in Arunachal Pradesh. In the last 20 years of your life, did you ever get one story of Arunachal Pradesh in any Indian media? You have never got. 12% of India is tribals. Tell me the last tribal story that you have read. 12% of India is tribals. 32% of India is scheduled caste, which is the last really prominent Dalit story that you have studied. So the point is, there is a polarization through media. So smart city is glorified, not the job issue of jobs of the unemployed. Vande Bharat is glorified, not the innumerable accidents in railways. Technology research is glorified, not social science research. So time is short. I would like to really go with you that economic polarization is happening, and more so in English media. The Indian language media is still a bit considerate, or rather responsive to the larger population, not the English media.
Yeah, although the panel is called political polarization, it's also becoming obvious that other kinds of polarization are quite intricately tied to political polarization, economic and social polarization, and so on. Satish, you want to address the question?
Yeah, just before I answer your question, Vinod, I quickly wanted to address Swati and Ashwini. I mean, part of the bias is also where you have STEM, the disciplinary breakdown between STEM and liberal arts, humanities and liberal arts on the one side. And that is why now you have a lot of tech companies picking graduates from the humanities because they come in with a completely different perspective, a very fresh perspective where they may have studied courses, done courses in cultural anthropology or literature or something. So what they've also noticed is there's a kind of a compassion and empathy deficit on the right, on the STEM fields, and STEM folks tend to be more conservative. So there is that kind of a bias too, and so it's not just it is a human bias that is very much present, and so that is one of the reasons why people are moving to I mean, employers are looking to hire graduates from the liberal arts and the humanities. To go back to Vinod's question, the media, legacy media, media like mainstream media, CNN, MSNBC, they collapsed long back. 2016, 2017, the ratings kind of started cratering. And now MSNBC is down to a few 100,000. Shows have been cancelled. CNN is the same thing. People have switched off from TV because, again, to go back to now, we are living in the world of convergence where I really don't have to switch on TV to watch it unless I'm watching the Olympics or cricket match or something. But the legacy media, they've collapsed and also have come into serious disrepute because of the way they reported on Israel and Gaza. It was abominable. The coverage of the Western media on what was happening was abominable. And of course, it is also where you have politicians who are subservient to Israeli interests, like the APAC here, media interests being owned by Jewish interests that do not allow you to print or share certain kind of news. So there's almost a kind of a blackout here in terms of what was really going on in Gaza. Except that we had social media, and in fact, a student of mine last spring, she's English, she lives in London. She went back since then. She did her honors thesis under me, and she compared the representations of Israel and Palestine on TikTok. And this was during the time when TikTok was being threatened with a ban. And so she found that almost 90% of the comments, she analyzed 100 TikToks, 90% of the comments, and she very carefully did a content analysis of all the comments, and 90% of the comments were pro-Palestinian. And that was one of the reasons, actually, the reason for TikTok to be banned. It was not about China. It was not about security. It was not about data sharing. I mean, all our data, we are walking data that is shared, across platforms. And so when we talk about Western press, yeah, it has come into disrepute. It is, nobody trusts it. Western media right now, especially in terms of reportage, especially the New York Times and Washington Post being taken over by Jeff Bezos now, who's literally taken over the editorial board. And so you have a mass a kind of layoff and people leaving out of their own volition. So The media scene is pretty bad, and that is why I tell people when they are planning to do journalism, I tell them to think about it seriously when you're planning to come to America to do a degree in journalism, because field is very, very precarious. I hope I answered your question, Vinod.
Yeah, thanks, Satish. I thought the audience could do with a little information and perspective on the crisis in the American media, which is sort of
Serious. It's very bad.
crisis
It's
in
serious.
the
It's serious.
American democracy in many ways.
Yeah.
Vagdevi tells me that there are quite a number of people who are participating in the conference online, and there is at least one person who wants to ask a question online. So to be fair to them, let's go online and get that question. Yeah. I see one person here. Yeah, please make your questions brief and.
Hello, sir. My question is to Chaudhary, sir. I'm Epsiba. So I accept that there are many cons of social media that leading trusted legacy to untrusted legacy media, but also there are pros that we cannot ignore, like giving voice to the subaltern community, cure community, and many more whose voices cannot be addressed in the mainstream media. So what's your opinion on that, sir?
I agree. Not just social media, even community radio for that matter. The women of Kutch had come out with a powerful radio in their own area, even before social media came. So today, there are many social media platforms of Dalit communities, of the subaltern communities, as you rightly say, of women's groups, of marginalized communities in various parts of the country. It's very important and significant that their voice can be at least shared. People can make their stories viral as well. There is a Dalit media group itself, very powerful in social media. I agree to that. Our concern was more about the misuse of social media for dis and malinformation. That was the concern.
Yeah, it's not a question. I just had a quick perspective. So this was a very interesting discussion. And yeah, I'm Varsha. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself. So I'm a PhD scholar. So just wanted to share an experience from practical. Just wanted to share an experience. Basically, I work with an IT MNC for about 5.5 years. So it's in context of algorithms and bias. So what I've noticed is that I've worked closely with developers. The way they think and the way we think as communicators are different. And that's what Professor Satish mentioned as well. You know, MNCs are now hiring graduates from arts, and I think I'm one of those. So when you tackle the same subject, the way they write and the way we write are different. So naturally, this is a larger question of maybe a bias or a polarization in education, and culture is also what I would say, because how they approach the same idea, writing codes for algorithms, and how we might do, both different. So yeah, thank you.
One line answer to the one, not answer, response in a way is that I strongly believe that technology students, engineering students should be given a grounding on social science and liberal arts. Similarly, liberal arts and social science students should understand particularly the technology which is connecting people together. So there has to be a mutual sharing of knowledge to an extent. I strongly believe in that.
Hi, this is Ritu Parna, sir. I have a question related to the dialectical discourses. As we have discussed, that there are many multiple things and the multiple agendas going on. What Ujjwal sir was stating, that the millions of agendas are there. Now, the prosumers are becoming the aggregators of some newspaper houses or news channels, right? Now, I'm asking about the early voters. If electoral systems are the way that we can denote the ultimate result for the democracy and the electoral voting systems, how can those early voters can make a decision based on these prosumer, consumers, and the multiple agendas?
So I would have heard you better if you had addressed it to one particular. Sorry, she's my student, so I can play around. Who was this question for?
This is to you and to Ujjwal sir also.
Bottom line question.
How can the early voters can make a decision out of the ultimate aggregators of from the prosumers, you can say?
So what you're saying basically is how can social discourse have a bearing on the early voters' agenda? Is that kind of a does that?
That's
I mean, again, to me, beyond the obvious, I cannot think of too much. I would have to say that the biases set in early because of the so-called algorithmic biases that are bombarded to that particular prosumer because of their early seeking the agenda process, right? So if they seek a certain kind of an agenda, that agenda will follow them right up to the point of their voting. Because they are an early voter, they might actually be the influencer for other voting communities because they might spread their agenda more on the through algorithmic processes. So beyond that, I'm unable probably to get the depth of your question.
Ujjwal, one sentence.
One sentence, yes. It also depends on the grooming or the schooling of the person concerned from childhood. If the person has been educated in a madrasa, chances that he will not vote for BJP. If the person has been educated in Swaminarayan temple, the chances are that he will not vote for a Muslim candidate. Not always true, but chances are. And then if this person has been grown as a rebel, can actually go against both and vote for a third person. So it depends on the grooming of the person and the influences on the mindset of that particular young person in the last few years before he votes or she votes. Thank you.
Okay. As we come to a close, you're all hungry or angry. You're willing to listen for another 15 minutes of my lecture or something? No. I have 2 minutes of a closing remark I want to make. I want to go back to something I started the panel with on the idea of democracy, on the idea of democracy through talk and not just through voting, in terms of deliberative democracy and not just aggregative democracy. Now, on that line, I mean, if we are talking about how we are all divided and polarized, what should be the commonsensical answer to that? I would say listening to each other, that we need to listen to each other, create more spaces for views other than our own to be heard and engage with them actively, not switch off, right? I mean, so it's important to have conversations. I'm reading a fascinating book right now, which I recommend to all of you. There's a book by an American political scientist, Jason Caro, C-A-R-O, called Radical Civility. And what he's suggesting is that we need to start being civil to each other, not just in the simple sense of being polite to each other, but in a kind of a radical sense where you don't give up on your beliefs. You don't have to, give up on what you, espouse in terms of ideology, whatever, but be willing to listen to the other and engage in a civil discourse with that person. So if you look at the cancel culture on American campuses or on our own campuses, we don't want people we don't like to even enter our campuses. I think if you don't have debate and discourse and dialogue, there is nothing much left of democracy, right? So I'm just closing this panel with a plea to go beyond polarization through the medium of conversation and dialogue. Yeah, thank you.
Satish sir, please be online. We are taking a picture.
Thank you, panelists, for the insightful discussion. As a token of appreciation, I now request convener to present a small token of gratitude to our esteemed panelists.